Hi. So just in case anyone doesn't know, my name's John Rogers. I work with the ncca-uk and sort of have done since the start of this year. But I've been involved a little bit longer, starting in, I suppose, 2009, 2010, when my daughter was diagnosed with neuroblastoma. So that was the start of sort of my involvement. I'm here to talk about INBRACED, which, as the slide said, stands for International Neuroblastoma Research and Collaboration for Effective Delivery. Thank you, Mark, for the acronym. And this is something that we started under a slightly different name last year in 2013. So, now these are the founding members of INBRACED, ncca-uk, as you know. Soul and Kids Cancer is a New York-based charity that funds research, and they've done so for, has it done 4 or 5 years? 7 years. And although they fund different types of paediatric cancers, they also fund internationally, and they always have done. And the idea is about certain ideas like getting low toxicity treatments, new agents in children as soon as possible. And the third organisation there is Joining Against Cancer in Kids, which is an organisation that in some ways spawned the NCCA in the first place, and the founders of that raise money for research. Yvonne Brown and sort of Dick Brown are sort of leading members in that. So these 3 organisations came together. Hopefully in the near future, we're in the process of doing this, we're going to be joined by 3 other organisations, and I'll just quickly run through those. ncca-uk is a Dutch-based organisation that funds research. Neuroblastoma Canada is an organisation, obviously, in Canada that spends most of its time on sort of parent education and advocacy. And the Children's Neuroblastoma Cancer Foundation is a US-based charity that really started doing this type of conference, and they've done that for I think 10 years or so in the US. Every year they hold a conference like this one in Chicago, and that's proved to be a big success and has really inspired this conference. Don't make me laugh, Lisa. So I'll just quickly describe what INBRACED is, and without reading out the whole slide, really there's sort of 4 areas that we focus on. Fostering collaboration. We recognised that we need to help the researchers and the clinicians find ways of making these partnerships. It's not that it doesn't happen at the moment, but it can always be helped. And a key part of that is provision of funds. I mean, Lou, you sort of pointed out that, you know, everything needs money to make these things happen, and you know, that is the main way that we do come together. We can pool resources in a way to fund projects that maybe a single charity wouldn't or couldn't. And as part of this, because we've got an international aspect, we can promote education and awareness. So we can see the differences in the different treatments and the different methods that are used, even things like nursing between different countries, and how that might affect the sort of patient experience. And a part of that is the best practice. So what about the first one, which is fostering collaboration? Well, a lot of these ideas of doing this came from the ANR conference, which Audrey Evans started in the mid-70s. And as far as I'm aware, that's the first regular event where people who had an interest in neuroblastoma could come together. And that happens every couple of years. And a lot of these ideas presented up here are from discussions that I had when I met Donna at ANR 2010 in Stockholm. We sat down and we tried to work out, you know, what could be done better, how could we help as really an organiser. At the time there wasn't an organisation. If we were coming from a basis of parent organisations, which is different to some of these other organisations that are listed in the line below, maybe we could do things a little bit differently. So there's 3 organisations I've just listed there. There's obviously a lot more that actually do conduct research. The COG, Children's Oncology Group in the US, SciPen in the EU, and APOG in Asia. These are organisations that, from my understanding, are led by the researchers and the scientists, and they really understand the scientific questions that need to be answered. But because they're tied to a geographical area, it means that they can't do things in the same way that we potentially can by not caring where the institutions are in the world. We just actually want to see cutting-edge research done quickly, as long as it's done in the right way. So why be interested in this international aspect? And I've just listed there just a few approximate figures. A lot of people know there's roughly 100 children in the UK. There's roughly 650 children in the US each year. And the approximation is that there's about 10,000 children a year worldwide. Now, most of those children don't have access to the type of trials that we've talked about here. And you know, there are people, there's an organisation I'm going to mention in a minute that actively tries to increase the quality of care for some developing countries. But there's also a potential, we think, there for mutual benefit if we try and include some of these other areas in the research that is being done in the developed world. So, what about the clinical trials that we're trying to promote? Well, focusing on the developed world, the idea is that we issue a request for proposals, that's the RFP, every year. And each year, the formulation of that RFP is really done amongst the partners, based on scientific advice that they get from researchers, clinicians, both within and outside the neuroblastoma world, because obviously the general sort of cancer research world is much bigger. And we come together and we issue an RFP. Now that was done in 2013, and it was awarded to a drug company sponsored trial, Mabvax Therapeutics, and we're still in the process of working out that, but the title of what that's turned into is gone from a phase 1 to a potentially phase 2 on the lower right. And that's the vaccine trial that people have talked about at this trial that's previously been trialled as a phase 1 in Sloan Kettering. So beyond that, we want to issue an RFP like this every year because, for instance, the one that's listed in the middle would be open in Barcelona, it will be open in New York and Bristol in the UK. And as much as possible, we kind of feel that if we can increase the access to these trials, it aids recruitment to them. Every relapse is different, is a phrase that people have mentioned. And it doesn't matter then necessarily how many people you have in your country that could go on to these trials. You can make up the numbers to make a definite scientific answer between countries. It's good for families because they can access a trial without having to travel. It's good for clinicians because they get to collaborate on these complex trials between countries, and it's good for the patients. So, what about the awareness of neuroblastoma? Well, we spent a lot of time trying to work out a way that we could share information better. There's a website that's been set up called INBRACED.org. And behind that is software that every day looks around, searches material for information about neuroblastoma. So pretty much any paper that's published, any patent that's granted, any press release by a drug company that mentions neuroblastoma or something related to it will appear here. It's curated, and there's a few people in the audience who are involved in editing that. But people with an expert knowledge of neuroblastoma assess what should go up there. So I would advise anyone who's interested, from sort of experts to parents, to actually look at that website and sign up for the newsletter. And so every day you can get a specific email which has got links to news stories or other articles about neuroblastoma. And that's something that in other fields that I've been and other people have been involved in makes a real difference, but it becomes a focus for where information can be garnered. You don't have to do Google searches or rely on bumping into someone who tells you about something. you can scan down a list every day, and if there's anything of interest there to you, you can click on a link and see what it's about. So, behind that, there is commercial software that does most of the work for the people in INBRACED, so that you don't have to spend hours each day looking at stories. Software does that for you. So that's taken a lot of the effort out of researching sort of the latest advances in neuroblastoma. Okay, so the best practice support that we want to do revolves around a few ideas, and the only one I really want to sort of talk about is the nurse exchange program. NCCA is funding a nurse in, it's almost done, or it's in the process of being done, in London. That is someone that we've seen can be used as a focus, not just for sharing information around places like the UK and Republic of Ireland, but also in the wider sense with centres like at CHOP, where other non-profits have funded specialist nurses in areas like neuroblastoma. And we've spoken to the people who've funded, I think it was Alex's Lemonade Stand, funded a nurse at CHOP. And that was a massive success. And we think some of the practices that these nurses do, the different ways that, even things like cleaning, looms on the children under treatment, they're done a little bit different in different centres, and everyone can learn from each other. But at the moment, there's no easy way for these people to share that expertise. So we'll hopefully be able to support that. So, structure of INBRACED is we have founding organisations, we have partner organisations. So, for instance, some of these activities we'll do just by partnering with another charity who will put some money in to support a certain activity. That doesn't necessarily mean they have to sign up to be part of INBRACED or commit themselves to anything. So, at the moment, we are working on trying to facilitate this award. It's been a learning experience to conduct an international trial between two different regulatory jurisdictions. But what we found out it is possible. It's just a little bit more difficult. But the feedback that we're getting is that the benefit that we're going to get from this in the increased collaboration and the ease of access to these new trials is going to far outweigh the extra time and effort that it's costing us. The next thing I just want to mention is the Global Neuroblastoma Network. On the second slide, I talked about there being 10,000 children a year who get neuroblastoma. The vast majority don't really have access to treatment. The new GNN is Kate Matei in here today? Okay, well, she's a driving force in the GNN. At the moment, what they're trying to do is actually just improve basic care. Give people access to sort of simple chemotherapy, give people access to pain relief. But we think that there's a way that we can work with the GNN. We've already had some discussions, but really it's still at an early phase, about a way that we can work together to mutual benefit. Mutual benefit for the science world, so we can increase understanding of neuroblastoma, but also help these children by giving them access to potentially new treatments that otherwise just wouldn't get funded. Even basic chemotherapy is not funded. We can maybe find a way to give the people access to a new trial. Now, there's hurdles there, but we think there is something that can be done. And the other thing, just at the end, I'm just going to talk about the RFP for INBRACED 2014. So just on the working with the GNN, we think it's possible that we can find clinical trials that pass ethical and other approvals in developed countries that could also be implemented in the developing world. So if we can do that, we could potentially do a simultaneous trial in the developed and the developing world, separate cohorts for scientific purposes, but it would give benefit to those children who don't have access to any treatment, and it would increase understanding of the disease and potentially the agents and the efficacy of the drugs that are under trial. We've done quite a bit of discussion with experts in this area, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. People have concerns in some countries that people from the outside are going to come in and experiment on children. And we think that if we can do something that is shared across borders in the developed and the developing world, then we can get round those concerns and we can benefit everyone. So that's an ongoing project, and that's something that we're going to be spending a lot more time in the next year. So I'm hoping I can report back something on that next year. I'll just move on to the RFP 2014. So while we're still in progress on trying to get the last RFP implemented and actually start recruiting children, in the next week or two we will issue this call for proposals. A key feature of it is we really want to see another clinical trial that at least has these features of it, and there's only certain stipulations. We want a trial that is opening a site in the US, a site in the UK, Republic of Ireland, and a site in Asia. We think that is possible, and we think that would have benefits to everyone involved. Certain technical aspects that we've listed here are partially driven by requests from experts, partially driven by us. This is a funding body that is pretty unique. It's actually driven by you, the desires and the things that you want to see. We want to see low toxicity treatments. We want to see treatments that are really aimed at non-responders from chemotherapy. It's exciting that what can be done with the vaccines and these other trials that are being done at the moment for children who reach remission. But what about those children who don't reach remission from chemotherapy? At the moment, there is effort going into those areas, but we want to see something that's specifically aimed at those type of children as well. Now, that's not to say that if there is a treatment or a proposal that's put forward for this that doesn't answer that question, that would be excluded, not at all. These are just areas of particular interest. So the only stipulation is really that it needs to be open in multiple sites. But areas of interest for us as an organisation are that we have some of these things listed here. Low toxicity. If it's great, if it's the first time in children, that's a hurdle that isn't always achieved. Even when a drug is successful in an adult cancer, it may never make it into children. So these are all beneficial targets for a proposal. The other thing that we want to see is ease of access for recruitment. We don't want to see situations where if someone's living in Denmark, they don't ever have access to a trial that's looking really promising and really exciting. So ways of facilitating children to travel if they have to, or do it as an outpatient care would be beneficial. And that's becomes more and more important the more dispersed the population is in a country. We don't want people having to spend a long time in clinic. It's expensive and it's not good for the family. And we want to see this happen as soon as possible. So we've put 2016. I know that seems like a long time. We want to see these things happen tomorrow, but unfortunately we kind of find that hurdles do appear, and they appear regularly. So there's no value specified in this award, but just to say that it was $500,000 for the last one, and it would be assessed on a case-by-case basis on the proposals. And particularly for this, it's going to be initially supported by Solving Kids Cancer, ncca-uk and Joining Against Cancer in Kids. But as with the previous trial, we'll hopefully partner with other funding organisations, charities and not, to actually support this trial. So that finishes my sort of summary of what INBRACED has been about. I hope that's okay. Thank you.